Hello, everyone. Hi, everybody. Happy Tuesday. Hope everyone's doing well today. Welcome, welcome. I'm Spacey Baltotelli. I am a Gadgeteer Bat and a game developer. And today, I wanted to continue my playthrough of A Hat in Time. I've really been enjoying the game so far.
Spacey 56 Nod 3 Spacey 56 Nod 3 Spacey 56
Yes, you might have seen
3.
that. Thank you for 16 months, by the way. Thank you for your support, Haas. You might have seen that we have a new emote. I love it so much. It's made by Mary Ed, who also made our Spacey 56 Wiggle. Oh, it's so good. I actually got 4 different variants with different mouth shapes, but in the Discord server, y'all voted for the cat face. Also, hi Alex, welcome back. Hope you're doing well. And hello, Sortable Shelf, Blake, Dark Red. Also, hello, Sammy and Paige. The fuel truck is here. We're getting more heat fuel. Spec, hello, it's been a while. Doing? Oh my goodness, yeah. The Marquee. So, I wanted to continue playing A Hat in Time today, but first, I caught wind that in a recent video interview with Christian Whitehead, the creator of Penny's Big Breakaway, and also one of the developers of Sonic Mania, mentioned me in mentioned me in the interview. So I'm curious to see in what context. So I think we could start just by watching through it. It's only a 20-minute video. But yeah. Also, we have pretty much done everything we can for the release of Freedom Planet 2 on consoles. So I'm very much looking forward to that. That's happening in 2 weeks. Oh my goodness, I can't believe it's gonna be finally here. And then obviously we'll keep updating the PC version to tie up some loose ends, but development has pretty much sunsetted on Freedom Planet 2. Finally, after 8 years. It's a surreal feeling. Yeah, the excitement's real. This is going to be a lot of people's first experience with Freedom Planet 2, or even the Freedom Planet series in general. Also, I have good news for Nintendo Switch owners. If you own Freedom Planet 1 on Switch, you get a 10% discount in Freedom Planet 2, permanently. Bug-free too. Well, the console version is going to be in an earlier build than the PC version, unfortunately. But I'm hoping that we can update it one more time to have parity with the PC version. But either way, it's pretty close. It's pretty close. So I'm looking forward to seeing what people think. It'll also be interesting to see how people react to certain parts of the story in the modern day, because the story was made in 2015, and I've just been kind of nervous if it still holds up today. So hopefully people understand that, okay, this is almost a decade old game at this point. Oh my goodness. You saw the first 6 levels online, but this will be your first playthrough. Oh. Yeah, that's awesome. I hope you enjoy the rest. Okay, Alex says you still got 1 foot in pain, but you're getting there. It takes 6 weeks to fully heal, and you're on week 3 currently. Much better than it had been, though. Oh, I'm glad to hear that, Alex. Yeah, I'm glad to hear about the procedures. So many good beans in the chat. Haven't been here in a while, Sortable Shelf. Yeah, it's been a while. Hope you're doing well. The crowns are rough, but you're okay. You're a baked bean. Today is officially the first day of spring, if I recall. And it is snowing outside, and there's snow on the ground. Still. But I'll give it another week or 2, and then I think we'll get steady spring weather. I'm really looking forward to that because I've been cooped up indoors all winter. And I think having a reason to just go out and get yummy things to eat and just drive in the in the forest and stuff, and take the puppies for a walk too. I think that's really gonna help with Sammy's like anxiety at night, because whenever I go to bed, of course that wakes up the dogs, and they've been napping like through all evening, so they're just like full of pent up energy when I'm going to sleep, and I think that's the reason why Sammy is barking at night. So I'm curious to see if taking like springtime walks will help alleviate that. He's still barking a bunch at night? Yeah. It helps if I keep him in my room with me, like shut the door so he can't get out. That way when I yell at him, he'll actually hear me. Because otherwise he just like goes out to the opposite side of the house and starts barking there. And he can't hear me yelling at him to stop unless I physically go out there and say stop. Yeah, I don't know. It's genuinely affecting my quality of sleep. So I hope we can figure something out. Oh, yeah, thank you, Alex. Happy spring to you, too. You saw one person stream the first game and she was really struggling because she wasn't used to 2D games? Oh, okay, so the point you find interesting is that most Sonic fans now all grew up with the 3D games and never played the 2D ones. So 3D Sonic-like projects tend to get more attention than 2D ones. Yeah, I think that makes sense. It's always been like that, hasn't it? Like 3D projects just tend to get more like press attention and eyeballs, I suppose. But it's really curious to like, it's really interesting to think that like a lot of like people who have grew up playing games have mostly like most of their earliest memories are with 3D games, and they didn't play 2D games until much later. That's interesting to think about. Oh, Leo Hightower, hi. Let me get down so I can take sippy. Hi. You just saw an unhinged Russian review of Freedom Planet 1. Now you can't unsee most of the first game's bosses being clumps of balls. Yeah. I kind of based that on like early consoles like the Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis, which also did kind of the same thing. Of course, in Freedom Planet 2, we had a much better art team. And the artists who carried over from Freedom Planet 1, their skills had improved. So we were able to make the parts like less ball-like for the most part. Let me take a sippy. Good stuff. You're a Game Boy gamer? Nice. I had pretty much every Nintendo console growing up. I skipped out on a few of the Sony consoles, mainly PSP and PS Vita, and I also skipped out on a bunch of the later Xbox consoles too. The latest Xbox console that I owned was a Xbox 360. Of course, that got the red ring of death, and I don't really own like Xbox anymore. But I've been like, other than the PSP and PS Vita, I've been keeping up with Sony's consoles as well. Like, it's just useful to have them so that I can actually like test and play the games that we publish right on the consoles. Also, U.S. Homeland Security, thank you for the follow. I appreciate that. What the heck? Okay. Yeah, you know that impersonating a federal official is like a crime, right? Okay. What? That made me lose my train of thought. What was I gonna say? Oh my gosh. Well, thank you for the laugh. Not really a federal official person. You saw a crime take place. Yeah, Mike says Freedom Planet 2 stepped up in every way compared to Freedom Planet 1. The first is still your favorite, though. Yeah, I do have a soft spot for the first one, too. Because it got me where I am today. And also, like, ever since I played it for the first time, last year, for the first time in, like, pretty much since Freedom Planet 2 started development, I never touched the game until, like, last year's stream, and I was surprised at how well it holds up. You just bought the first one, you can't wait to dig into it? Oh, I hope you have lots of fun, Haidon. Okay, so... Oh my goodness. Yeah, it feels really good to make like a game, again, that's at the scale of like Freedom Planet 1. To not have to like worry about making something like quite as grandiose as Freedom Planet 2. Because I'm very proud of how Freedom Planet 2 turned out, but also it took 7 years to make. And like you all know, I've been candid about this in the past. It kind of gave me a bit of a crisis in terms of my career. Like, I can't keep making games that big, or otherwise I'll only be able to make like 2 or 3 more games before I retire. So Chrono Gear has been a nice change of pace. It's going to be very nice to just like make like a game within like a year and a half, and then call it a day. And like whenever you start a new project and you put a new team together, you kind of like form like a new community between each other, and it's really nice. I've met so many cool people through this, like through every project that I've made, really. And it's kind of interesting because like all 3 of like the past 3 games that I've worked on like have all kind of shared the same DNA. Like they're the same like kinds of games. Like I very much lean into like a very specific style of game, which is like, you know, like speedy 2D platform games. It's something that I'm very confident in, and something that like, you know, I have a lot of experience with. But it'll be interesting after this project to try and pivot to something else. Like either like the 3D racing game project, or maybe like assisting somebody else with their project. In a more involved way, I suppose, than I have been assisting with Pell Crash 2. Because with Pell Crash 2, I've just been like observing for the most part, and like just like checking in every now and then to see how progress is going, and it looks so good. Oh my gosh. Speaking of which, I heard that they reached their final stretch goal. So Libby and the bots will be in Pell Crash 2, thanks to y'all's generosity. It still has a few more days left, so we'll see how much more money they can raise, but I'm so happy for Friend and Fairy. Yeah! Tale as old as time, song as old as rhyme, Libby and the boss. Ashley made that joke, I can't take credit for it. Alright, so I'm gonna take Sippy, and then we can hop over and watch that video to see what Christian had to say. I'm very, very curious. Mila returning cameo? I'm not sure if we can get perms for it. But maybe another Freedom Planet character? I don't know. We'll see. Oh my goodness. Alright, so let's hop over to the game screen, shall we? Or in this case, the video screen. You saw this video the other day, actually? Oh, nice. Yeah, I can't wait to watch it. Bye. Okay. Did I set this up correctly? Hold on a second.
Some people say you should never meet your heroes. To these people I say, get better heroes, because I spoke with Christian Whitehead on the phone.
Okay, how's the volume?
And he is absolutely
compared to my voice.
There are some names that jump out larger than others in the indie gaming sphere, and Christian Whitehead is one of them. Starting as an indie developer working on Sonic the Hedgehog
okay, I'll increase it more.
Before being hired by Sega to do the real thing and making Sonic Mania. He and several of the other developers that worked on Sonic Mania then formed Evening Star and have created their own debut title, Penny's Big Breakaway. In videos, I often like to portray Christian Whitehead as kind of the rock star of the Sonic fan game community.
He absolutely is a rock star.
With him, I absolutely
like he was super chill. Like when I talked to him during the beginnings of Freedom Planet 2's development, that was back when Skype was the main thing that everybody was using. I don't even think Discord existed at that point. But yeah, we communicated through Skype, and we kind of like talked shop about what game engine we wanted to use for Freedom Planet 2. And at the time, he was kind of like fooling around with kind of like a concept for Freedom Planet 1 being transferred to kind of like its own like engine based on the Retro engine. And he got as far as getting I think getting Mila in Aqua Tunnel, and that was it. But without like any gimmicks or anything, obviously. But I was pretty impressed with that. So it was kind of a concept to see if we could get like Freedom Planet physics working in the retro engine. Ultimately, I decided that for the sake of being able to bring in other programmers because like Unity, like at the time was like the most used game engine. And like there were a lot of like game programmers out there that were familiar with C#. So I ultimately requested that the engine be in Unity. So after that, we just kind of like collaborated together like on like stuff. Like I gave him like a list of specifics that I wanted the engine to be capable of. Like the specific abilities that could be used and like the specific like game flow and stuff like that. And it took about 2 months. But then after that, we had a fully fleshed out like base engine for Freedom Planet 2. It was just a simple small test level that had the physics and it had Lilac, and that was it. And from there, like our team like pretty much took over the entire thing, and then Whitehead went to focus on the formation of Evening Star. So that was pretty cool. That was a pretty cool experience. And now Unity's only used for fan games. Yeah. Now Godot has become kind of like the rock star of like game development engines. So it's kind of interesting how the times have changed since then. So we've gone from Skype and Unity to Discord and Godot. Yeah, Godot. I'm so happy that Godot has like popped off so much, especially with it being an open source engine that is never going to have any like subscription models or anything. Like the most you would have to do in terms of like paying for Godot is paying for like exporters to consoles, and some console exporters are like cheaper than others. As far as I'm aware, they have one for Switch. They have I think there's ways. But like it's open source, and just the fact that the community is just like so huge and vibrant means that like more and more you're seeing that it's getting like way easier to find programmers that have GD script experience. And it's also very helpful that Godot has support for C# out of the box and could support more programming languages depending on what you want to do with it, because it is open source. You can add any language you want. So I'm just really happy about that. It's been really cool learning all about like Godot and being a part of their community over the past like year and a half. Yeah, there's lots of great resources for first-time coders. Yeah.
Stand by that assertion. How else do you define somebody who, when asked what the moral of his own life story is, responds with a David Bowie quote? Speaking with Christian Whitehead feels like something of a holy grail.
Yeah, that's Whitehead.
I have long wanted to interview him, obviously couldn't get anywhere near him while he was working with Sega, and his social media presence is fairly sparse, so there's not an awful lot to latch onto.
Yeah, he doesn't really use social media.
It's a completely different ball game. As soon as Penny's Big Breakaway Shadow dropped, I emailed Private Division and asked if I could have an interview, and for some reason, they said yes.
Let's go!
The PR team probably regretted this fairly early into the interview. According to my contact at the company, quote, "It was clear you were passionate," which we all know is code for you were an absolute fanboy. I couldn't help myself. He was just so interesting and cool. He had so many fun things to say, and even when I threw him a question that was only half-baked or half-developed, he gave such a spectacular, interesting answer. Before the interview, I did put up a post on our channel's community tab asking you guys questions, and I did ask him some of your questions. So if you're interested in knowing why penguins and what kind of yo-yo tricks Christian Whitehead can do, then keep watching. The one mine and niggle.
Yeah, I remember I remember in an earlier interview before the game came out, they mentioned that they went with the penguins because they wanted kind of like a more like organic sort of like base enemy that you would escape from. They were worried that like for most of the game, players wouldn't really know how to precisely aim the yo-yo to attack like traditional enemies. So instead, they just kind of made like penguins as a sort of like blobby, like zombie horde-esque sort of foe that you could kind of like fight just by like waggling the control stick in random directions. So I dig it. I dig it. I see what they were getting at. Edge Drive, hi. Hope you're doing well. I'm watching an interview with Christian Whitehead regarding Penny's Big Breakaway, because people have told me that he mentions me in this video. So I'm curious to see what the context is for that.
With this otherwise delightful experience is the fact that I've been asked not to use the actual audio from our phone call in this video. And that's disappointing because it's just right there on my hard drive, but I can't share it with you. Instead,
that's interesting.
To give you the full interview as best I can, I've taken selections from it and I will be reading them myself, which is not ideal. It is absolutely not the way that I would like to present this, but it is the best I can do with what I have available. To that end, the rest of this video will be Christian Whitehead's own words coming out of my mouth. He will touch on topics such as his own experience of growing and learning as a developer and a programmer, on the process of building a Sonic the Hedgehog game and of building Penny's Big Breakaway,
now, I wonder...
and where he sees the future of momentum-based games are going forward.
Nice. Yeah, I wonder what the reason for like not being able to use his voice is. I wouldn't be surprised if it's just because he's shy. Like, everybody has their own preference. In terms of, like, you know, when they want to share their voice and all that. I used to kind of prefer that I be interviewed in text only. But ever since I became a VTuber, I've been, like, a lot more open about using my own voice. But there are certain contexts where I feel like a text interview would be more appropriate. And conversely, there are contexts where, like, you know, like a video presence would also be more appropriate than, say, a VTuber model. But it all depends. Yeah.
This then is the story.
Yeah, Toby Fox is the same way too. He's very shy. Yeah. Brought back to the T-Lope scene for this one. Nice. Oh, thank you, Mike.
The story of Christian Whitehead. When I was a young kid, I literally thought video games were magical. I didn't understand how they worked, just this idea of mythos behind games. You'd always hear rumours about cheats you could do from your mates, and it kind of felt like anything was possible if you knew the secret chance to make something happen.
Yeah.
There'd be classic rumours about how to get a secret, like Goro's brother in Mortal Kombat, and you'd try doing all these different codes and stuff. They wouldn't work, but you'd think, one day I'll figure it out. So I think early on, I just
I miss having that mindset where, like, we assumed anything could be possible.
Sonic was really interesting because it had this debug mode cheat that let you break the game in really interesting ways. I still wasn't super computer literate with programming, but I got hints like, oh, this object behaves this way if you don't set it up with this other thing. And so I kind of built up the idea of logic and how one thing makes another thing happen.
Yeah.
One day, I was in a store, and I saw Click and Play for Computer advertised like, make your
Let's go!
games in just 30 minutes.
Let's go! I didn't know that Whitehead was a Click and Play child, just like me. Let's go! Click and Play kids! Yeah, that was my first exposure to game development too. I remember it, like, I was 11 years old when they got the program. I begged my parents to get it after I played, like, this bootleg CD with, like thousands of games on it. And, like, a few of the games were made with Click and Play. And whenever you close the application, it would, like, display, like, a pop-up window saying, like, oh, this game was created with Click and Play. Would you like to create your own games? Click this button to get, like, order information and all that. So, yeah, I begged my parents to get it. And then, yeah, that was my first exposure to, like, making games in my spare time. It's a very basic program. Like, you can't even do any scrolling or anything. You can only make, like, single screen, like, arcade-esque games, I suppose, with it. But it kind of, like, opened up a whole new door to me. A whole new way to kind of, like, express my ideas. And from there, I kind of, like, moved on to bigger and better game development softwares. Click and Play siblings, yeah. I still have my original Click and Play box in the basement. I was actually looking for a spare controller because my PS4 controller finally died on me. I ordered another one, but in the meantime, I'm going to be playing today with an Xbox controller. So I was in the basement looking for the Xbox controller, and then I spotted the Click and Play box. Oh my goodness. But yeah. That's so cool. I can't believe, like, honestly, I can't believe it because if I'm not mistaken, he's like from Europe, I think. No. He's not European. He's Australian. Yeah, and the company that made Click and Play, they're known as Click Team now. But back then, they were known as Europress Software. So they're not an American company. But they kind of like got like a pseudo, like they were published by Maxis, like Click and Play was. So they kind of like put that on the box, like from the creators of SimCity. Yeah. It's French? Oh, sweet. Yeah. If I'm not mistaken, it is French.
Minutes or something. Initially, I was a little bit disappointed because I was imagining being able to make a 3D PlayStation game, and all you could really do is a single-screen retro-style arcade game.
Yep, exactly.
The first game I ever made was this game called Space Cows, and it was basically just Space Invaders, but cows.
Yep.
The Sonic fan game scene kicked off soon after that. I got into that, and there's a lot of information on that online, but moving on to Xbox 360 and stuff, I was really at a stage in my life where I thought, I'm probably not going to be doing games, because that's for big companies, and I'm just a small person, small creative. And so at that point in my life, I was playing music in bands, and I wanted to do music videos and short film, and so I studied film and photography at university. I had a job as a freelancer doing video production and editing motion graphics, which was all still heavily computer adjacent, but then I had this hobbyist side of me that was always poking around at making games. Then, when mobile games became a big thing, then it was suddenly like the doors were open again to small people to experiment and make games. I definitely had this desire to make my own original game on mobile initially, but then it just happened to be the perfect time to try and do a Sonic thing because Sega was interested in my pitch to do Sonic CD, and then that really kicked off all the Sonic stuff. I went from being a passionate fan to someone who had the privilege of actually making stuff for Sonic, but I think for me, I always want to challenge myself to try something new and always be working on the skills, because especially with games development, I'm basically completely self-taught. I just had a real passion for the craft. I really admire how games have evolved over the last 30 years. My dream is to one day create something that's innovative in that kind of technological space. But I'm also just content to make something that people have fun with and enjoy, ultimately.
That's a good mindset.
The process of innovating.
Like innovating. People like especially when I went to college, community college, that's when all the colleges across my country were starting to get like into like game designs as a major, and they were just like constantly pushing like innovation. I don't entirely agree that that is like the path for everyone. Sometimes you just need to like kind of like you kind of like need to work with something that you're familiar with, but just like do it really, really well and kind of give it like its own like sense of personality and flair. And that honestly is all you need in order to make a memorable gaming experience. Like, you don't need to reinvent the wheel. You can base like your gameplay on like existing concepts. But when you combine it with like the overall aesthetic of the game, that is like produced because of like your team's art style and makeup, that's what makes every game unique and special in its own way, even if they have like roughly the same gameplay. Like everything from like the graphics and the music and like the story. There's so many different elements that kind of like form like the identity of different games. So you don't need to like have like truly innovative gameplay in order to make something that strikes a chord with people. I think like honestly, I think Undertale is a good example of that. Its battle system is probably the most unique thing that it had going for it at the time it released. And even then, its battle system had been done before by other games. But when you combine it with like the world that Toby Fox created and like the unique like black and white aesthetic of most of like the battles, but yeah, it's a very basic game, but it's just like the story and the characters that really like pop out to people, and that's what made it like so special. So you don't need to innovate. Sometimes you just need to like do something in like a memorable style, you know? Yeah, Toho too. Like prior to Toho, there had been plenty of shoot 'em up games, like so many like arcade shoot 'em ups. But Toho kind of like broke the mold where instead of having like spaceships, they had magical girls. And just like the story and the setting is what most people kind of like take away from Toho, including my friend Ashley, who has recently fallen down the Toho rabbit hole. Yes, and the music, yes, exactly. A banger soundtrack can go a long way. So that's something that I also like highly value, and something that I'm really glad that I put a lot of time into practicing myself. So yeah, oh my gosh. Yeah, there are many ways to make a game that is worth playing to people.
With Sonic Mania, basically Sega just wanted us to revisit the original levels, but just change a couple of things to make it have a few unexpected moments. We really dialed that up as far as we could go. We wanted to have different bosses, different mechanics, and do things that take people's expectations, but then deliver them something that they weren't expecting. I think for me, it was really tricky after Sonic Mania because there's a lot of fans emulating that style, and on the one hand, that's really gratifying and cool to see them be supportive of what we did and want more of the same. But then, on the other hand, how do I do something that they haven't seen? So I think there was a lot of pressure to just fit a certain mold with that. Having an original game, and a 3D game as well, it's something that I don't think a lot of our audience even really thought that we would be capable of doing. So I was really psyched to show that we could do that. Definitely, there's a lot of challenges in doing that, but I'm pretty proud of what we did put out with Penny. I lived through the generational change from 2D to 3D as a kid, but then being able to kind of live that experience as a developer was interesting.
Yeah. Like, that's another thing. Like innovation is not inherently a bad thing to aim for, nor is it inherently like the most difficult thing that you can do. Like the main thing about like making an innovative game title is to kind of like subvert the expectation that people have for you specifically. Like it's just like what Christian Whitehead said, like few people expected Evening Star's first project to be a 3D platform game, given their like track record with like making like 2D Sonic games officially for Sega. Or maybe not necessarily their track record, but like Whitehead's track record. Yeah. So breaking expectations, that is also a good thing to aim for. I think that is also something that we kind of leaned into with Freedom Planet 2 compared to the original Freedom Planet. And that's why we really tried to push Freedom Planet's gameplay like in a more original direction, to kind of like separate it from its Sonic roots, and to kind of like focus on the unique aspects of Freedom Planet 1 that were like the most different from Sonic, but also kind of like played to its strengths. So and from there, I feel like Freedom Planet 2 is like where the series like really like forms its own identity. So like it's just like that fan video review that I keep quoting. Like Freedom Planet 2 isn't like what would happen if Treasure made a Sonic game. It's like what would happen if Galaxy Trail made a Freedom Planet sequel. And yeah, I found that to be touching, and it kind of like affirmed to me at the time that that Freedom Planet 2 definitely was like a step in the right direction in terms of just like, you know, innovating, not necessarily in terms of the larger gaming sphere, but in terms of like the series itself, like internal innovation, I would suppose. Do you think Nero was a great addition, especially for that reason, Alex? Oh, thank you. Yeah, I'm super glad that we added Nero as a playable character too, because like it was really cool to kind of like to have 4 different characters with wildly different like fighting styles, and like having Nero like be like the power type that has like slower but stronger attacks. So that lends itself very well, I think. And like also that like the sequel also just kind of like gave us an opportunity to like further flesh out concepts that were undercooked in the first game because we didn't have enough time or resources. Like I'm glad that the first game had 3 playable characters, but I feel like the characters outside of Lilac were definitely undercooked. Like you could tell we didn't really have a lot of experience in terms of like their movesets and what to really do with them. So I'm glad we were able to have the opportunity to make a sequel, because it allowed us to like further work on those characters and kind of give them like updates to their moveset that like brought them more in line with Lilac in terms of how powerful they were and how easy they were to get a hang of. You wonder what innovation FP3 could bring? A question for the future, perhaps? Perhaps. I wouldn't mind making a Freedom Planet 3 in the future, but I'd probably want to be very careful about how long it's being produced. Because again, I am not enthusiastic about another like 7-year project. But I would be honored if we had if an opportunity came up that would allow us to make like a Freedom Planet 3 in a little less time. But right now I'm just like having fun, like experimenting with slightly new concepts.
Because at the time there was no information on how you build a 3D engine, or how a character should move in 3D, or what the calculations are to do 3D collision. In a lot of ways we took the hard path because we came from this background where we made our own engine for Sonic Mania, and then with Penny it's a new iteration of that kind of engine lineage, but with design for 3D games. So we had to really think, what's the process for designing a level in 3D? And how do we do it in a way that our designers enjoy working with? So there were a lot of technical hurdles to work out, but then also on the creative side, I don't want to just make something that's a traditional collectathon like Banjo-Kazooie, even though that's a fantastic game. I think it wouldn't be us if we just tried to emulate one particular game style. I think it was more a combination of living through that time period and then just wanting to experience it ourselves as developers.
Yeah. That's a good point. Like, in terms of whether you should build your own engine, most of the time I honestly would say no. But building an engine does come with like very distinct advantages because having the engine specifically crafted around your specific game and what you want to do with it can be huge in terms of like being able to like quickly prototype new concepts and to like work with like your art team and your level design team to quickly like come out with new concepts. Like there's no like middle ground in terms of having to learn the engine first, like the game engine first, and then learn how to like build levels in it, because you are the ones who built the engine. And the reason I feel that can be risky is because it does add extra time to development to have to craft your own engine first. But like if you're smart with it, like Evening Star was, then it is a huge advantage. Because the engine will only have specifically what you need and nothing more, nothing less. It's just like it fits like a glove that way. So major props to them for kind of like going in that direction, especially with the fact that there really aren't as many resources for like 3D platform games as there are for 2D platform games. So that's really cool. Yeah, hats off to them.
3. The design of Penny's big break.
Yeah. Like trying to make, like Ralph says, it's like trying to make cereal, but having to cook your own bowl first. Yeah. Just like fire up the kiln and make like a clay bowl first, and then the bowl is specifically like shaped to the amount of cereal that you want. It kind of like reminds me of like the few times that I commissioned like Gothic homeware on Etsy. Because like none of the brand name stores really had anything that in the style that I was aiming for. So yeah, I guess like kind of like that. I get what you're saying. Also, hi Ralph, it's been a while. Didn't know you did that. Yeah. I like ordering stuff on Etsy every now and then. It's pretty nice to support like the like artists in terms of like like real life like artists, like sculptors, I guess would be a more accurate term. You do that for jewelry? Yeah. One of my favorite pieces of jewelry that I got off of Etsy is actually just like a chandelier crystal, but it looks so good. I wear it all the time, especially with sweaters. It looks really good on me. Yeah, I'll have to wear it next time we meet up.
Penny wasn't really designed with a specific generational spec in mind, but a lot of the feedback we've got has been this game either will remind someone of a long-lost Saturn game or a GameCube game. It's sort of this hazy feeling depending on when you grew up. There's definitely different resonance points for people.
I could see the
and I think
GameCube
that
vibes.
just came from us, again because we had to make our own engine and it was our first 3D game. We were pretty clever and conservative with how we did the art, just because it's very easy for a budget to explode if you're changing and chasing after fidelity, so we just felt like we wanted an art style that was crisp and clean and colourful. We drew broad inspirations from the Bauhaus art aesthetic, which prides itself on geometric cleanliness and simplicity. Clean,
Yeah, the art style of the game is so good.
At points has a bit of an early CG look, where they had a lot of polygons, but then not a lot of complicated.
I don't even know if the game has a proper lighting engine.
Glossy shapes. So I
feel like the few shadows that it has are baked in.
Pixel art workflow, and that was a workflow that we understood really well, and were able to create really high fidelity 32-bit style sprite animations. But then in 3D we're like, okay, we're not going to be at Arc System Works level of artisanship on our first game.
Yeah, so I have heard that like from like some people who have played that the art style isn't like for everyone. Like some of them have like said that like the art style of Penny kind of like hurts their eyes a little bit because of the lack of lighting. But I think it's very unique and charming. So it depends on what you're looking for. But that's really interesting to hear about.
Focus on something that looks fluid and clean, and I think organically we just arrived at this sort of GameCube aesthetic. 4. Penny versus Sonic.
Penny versus Sonic. Oh, hello Final 42. Hug the bat, hug the bat. Hope you're doing well. You're glad you're not the only one that thinks this game has GameCube vibes? Yeah, I feel like the GameCube would actually like have like the specs to kind of like pull this kind of game off. Like, I think the Dreamcast would be cutting it very close. So, but I think the GameCube could definitely do something like this. Also, VSTP, thank you for care combo. Okay, I'll take Sippy and Stretchy. This game is your pick for soundtrack of the year so far? Oh yes, T-Lope's cooked, like always. he always cooks, but he cooked. Like, especially for this game. It's just like such a pleasure to hear an entire game soundtrack by T-Lopes. Yeah! Oh. Congrats on the job. Oh, congrats on the job, Ralph. And thank you for care combo. Yeah, I'm stretching now.
It's challenging, because at face value there's definitely some elements that you could look at and be like, yeah, this is similar to Sonic. The clean geometric kind of design of the stages, and the fact that you can use terrain to pick up speed. But I'd say the way Penny moves is quite different to Sonic. Sonic is just an intrinsically fast character. He doesn't need any gadgets, he is his own kind of engine, he can just rev up and go.
Other Alex says, as some YouTube said in his stream, Penny's Big Breakaway is the real best transition of the Sonic formula into 3D. Yeah, you can tell that they definitely kind of like have like the momentum-based physics that the 2D Sonic games had. But like, the way they translated it into 3D just feels so nice and organic. It kind of reminds me of like a skateboarding game almost. Like the way that you kind of like pull tricks and string combos together, and the way that you kind of like use like ramps and slopes to build up speed. It honestly reminds me more of a skateboard game than of like a Sonic game almost. So it's kind of cool how they kind of leaned into that to kind of like make it like unique. Like I have said before in my game dev streams that I feel like when you're working on the game, like early on, that is that's like an experimental phase of game development. And at some point in development, like the game will eventually tell you what it wants to be. And I feel like that definitely happened with Penny's Big Breakaway. Like at some point when they were building like the physics engine and everything, like the game, like everything just kind of like got pushed into like a specific direction of having these like skate park-esque levels. So like you can tell like this is not meant to be like a Sonic or a Sonic clone. It's meant to be its own thing.
Whereas Penny is just an ordinary denizen of Macaroon, and it's really her partnership with Yo-Yo that allows her to move in interesting ways.
Yeah.
So I think as a player, you have to work a lot more if your goal is to clear the stage as fast as possible. You have to work a lot harder than you would in Sonic to do that, because it's all about changing and chaining all the moves together and maintaining a flow.
Yep.
So I think the fact that we have a combo system in the game, there's almost a little bit of Tony Hawk DNA, in terms of if we're talking about what 3D games influence the game. 5. Penguins. So, penguins, there's multiple layers to it. Initially, when we came up with the gameplay concept, one thing we wanted, a key way we wanted to differentiate ourselves from other 3D platformers, is not require the player to actually jump on enemies, because that's quite often a bit difficult to perform. So instead it became this idea of a swarm, of a crowd of people. One person is relatively harmless, but then if you get a whole mob of people around you, then that becomes very difficult to avoid. you can get swallowed up. We didn't really want an angry crowd of people, that would be a bit intimidating. And so then we had Emperor Eddie, and then it's like Emperor Penguin. There's that layer to it. But then I see them as squeaky bowling pins. You can knock them about and they'll take punishment, but they don't get hurt. They just kind of bounce off everything and recover. The other purpose they serve is to provide pressure points in the stage so that you're encouraged to keep moving. They help amp up the challenge in certain areas where maybe you have to use yo-yo to pull a wall down. And that action on its own is pretty straightforward, and you can take it at your own pace, but suddenly when you have a crowd of penguins coming up behind you, you suddenly have to pull off that action a lot quicker. It's this psychological factor of, oh no, I'm going to get captured if I don't move quickly. It's interesting. I think some people find the penguins adorable, some people get totally stressed out and they're like, oh, I wish the penguins would go away, I need to relax. But we just wanted something a bit goofy and fun. But then also, just as they build up, it builds the tension.
Yeah, that's really cool. Like, so it's not necessarily that it would be hard to aim the yo-yo at traditional like platform game enemies. It's that it would be hard to aim your jumps at them. And I do notice like sometimes like 3D games can get really clever about like player collision. Like I remember watching a video on Kirby and the Forgotten Land where they will use the position of the camera relative to where Kirby and his target is to kind of like adjust his hitbox on the fly. So that way, if from the camera's point of view, if it looks like Kirby's attack should hit the enemy, it will, even if the hitbox doesn't normally connect to it. I think that's really cool. I think that that is something that I would love to experiment with someday if I made a 3D platform game. And you could do it that way, but like it's cool that they kind of like went in a different direction to where like instead of doing like camera trickery like that to make like jumping on enemies easier, they make it so that there's no enemies that really like you don't jump on enemies in the game. Like, yeah, the whole thing behind the penguins. I'm also very glad that the penguins were not people, because that would be quite intimidating. I agree. So having the little penguinos chase you around is just like yeah, it definitely adds to the game's like charm and aesthetic. I do kind of agree with people who said that the penguins shouldn't respawn. Maybe like they could respawn like once or twice, and then if you just like spend enough time, the game kind of like gives you a break and it's like, oh, okay, so like you can take a little bit of a breather now that you've dealt with them. So it is cool that you can still fight them if you want, but it's just this kind of like flowy, organic like mass of entities. And it does lend itself well to the way that the game handles momentum and like chaining combos and stuff. Haidon says, like they say, there's more than one way to skin a cat. Having it be penguins instead of people makes it way more fun. Yeah, I agree. I like the character designs of the penguins. You don't think they respawn other than in places with a specific penguin-based weapon? Oh, okay, that makes sense. Like with the penguin, like the big penguins, like detector things, like the big robot penguins that have like the laser sight, I think.
6. Can you do yo-yo tricks? And did you have a yo-yo consultant for the game? I think I can only do a sleep and a walk the dog. I used to be able to do the trapeze triangle trick when I was in school. But we kind of went in deep on the yo-yo tricks. The thing that was tricky, the way they move the yo-yos in competitions is tight and close to the body, and they're always flicking it around. We concepted a whole bunch of moves, and most of them did make it into the game. There was a few that didn't make it into the game just because it was tricky to translate it into meaningful gameplay. For instance, like detaching the yo-yo temporarily from the screen, which is a move people can do. We had this idea of making a tightrope and then using it to cross gaps. That was thrown out early on because the move that we discovered that was really fun in the game was just when you slept the yo-yo in space. You'd always need to have it gripping onto a pole before you could do a swing. But then, when we were testing the initial prototype, we thought, what if we just let the player sleep the yo-yo anywhere in space and then just use that as an anchor point? And that really changed the game early on, where once we had that, you can go anywhere.
Yeah, that's such a good move.
It's not really realistic moves at all, but I think it retains the spirit.
The fact that you can just kind of like hold the button and you've created like a swinging point.
See it whip around. So we just wanted to capture that part of real life yo-yoing. 7. The biggest challenge. Personally, the biggest challenge was basically building the engine. I think with Sonic Mania we
Yep.
did the 5th iteration
Just like I
of
said.
the engine for that, but that only took me about 2 months to make because a lot of it was just building on what I'd done previously. And so it was very easy to move on and focus on the game itself. But with Penny, we'd already spent a couple of years building the groundwork of the engine, and so we had the necessary base to develop the game, but then there was always a never-ending supply of interesting problems to solve. The design team needs specific tools to make the shapes in a more efficient way. We came up with this procedural generation system where basically the art team created a single set of assets and then the designers blocked out the shapes for the level. Typically with 3D games, when we researched it, you do what's called a grey box pass and you map out how the stage plays and then you give that to the artist and then they make a nice decorated version of the stage and then that's sort of locked in place and you can't change it. But our experience on Sonic was we were doing a lot of tweaks to the terrain shapes all throughout testing because we wanted to try and get the best sense of momentum through the stage. We wanted the ability to continually tweak the angle of terrain on the design side, but then we didn't want to have to continually be like, hey Tom, can you redecorate this part of the level for us? So our technical artist, Brandon, basically created this entire sweep of Maya scripts that take the art assets that our artists make and then conform them to the shape of all the level geometry, and then it creates the pretty version of that. I had to do a lot of rendering programming on my end, where I programmed all the rendering backends, like Switch, PS5, Xbox and PC, and then did the light mapping system, and so there was just a lot of technical things that I had to make. I think going forward for me, the great thing is we can leverage...
Oh, you mentioned light mapping, so there is kind of a lighting engine.
Even further on the gameplay side of things, and use the prior experience on our first 3D game to kind of go even further, hopefully. Again, I'm completely proud of what we achieved with this, but as a developer, there's always the next level. How can I improve my workflow and do better than I did before? So yeah, I'm excited with the possibilities, having had this learning experience the first time. Particularly on the 3D side of things, how to work together as a team to make that type of game, there's a lot of things you have to figure out, and a lot of things that can slow you down if you don't have strategies in place to manage it. Another thing that was particularly
Yeah, one of the biggest challenges that I still struggle with as a game developer is bottlenecks. Like, there are definitely like plenty of situations where like one like section of the team is waiting on assets from another section. Like for example, like the level designers waiting on art assets, or artists waiting on like the concepts, I guess. Or like programmers again like waiting on art assets, or like yeah, it's just like one of the challenges when you start a new project is to make sure that you got your workflow in such a way that you can kind of like minimize the amount of bottlenecks so that like everybody has something that they can work on, even if they're waiting on somebody else. Programmers wait on mechanic specs. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so it kind of reminds me of like, has anyone played Factorio? Like that entire game, like you constantly deal with bottlenecks in like your production line. So that it kind of reminds me of that almost, but like on a smaller scale. But yeah, that's something that I definitely struggled with during Freedom Planet 2 because development took so long, and especially with like the pandemic going in full force at one point. Stuff just like slowed to a crawl because like everything was waiting on me like actually finishing some of the levels that we were working on, like the voice actors and the artists and like the animators and the programmers had all done their assets and sent them to me, and I just like needed to like build the levels and like record videos of them to share with the team for feedback. So like I was pretty much the bottleneck for like a good like portion of Freedom Planet 2's development. But thankfully it was something that I was able to overcome eventually. And after that point in development, I did like actively seek like additional like programmers and level designers to kind of like help lighten the load a little bit. Because I really couldn't, like, with a project that big, I couldn't do the same thing that I did in Freedom Planet 1, where I was really, like, the only level designer on the team. And in Freedom Planet 1's case, it was almost a necessity because of the way that Click Team Fusion works. Like, Click Team Fusion has absolutely zero version control. So, like, I kind of had to do everything on my own, and that actually, like, almost landed me in the hospital when, like, the last few weeks of Freedom Planet 1 were in progress, and like I had to do like nobody else on the team could do cutscenes. I had to do them, and I had to like make every single cutscene in the game in like 3 weeks. And I was like, oh my gosh. But yeah, I made sure not to make that mistake in Freedom Planet 2. And granted, in Freedom Planet 2, I still made like pretty much all the cutscenes. But I did create I kind of like made like kind of an expansion in Unity. What is it called? Like a like when you add code that kind of like adds like new menu in your interfaces within Unity. I did that for the cutscenes, and I made like a cutscene editor window. And that made it easier for other members of the team to kind of like fix bugs and other issues with the cutscenes. Yeah, spec that too. Like the Click Team Fusion has like, it has a system for like applying code globally to the game, but it causes issues and bugs. So like basically anytime that I made a change to the base engine in Freedom Planet 1, I had to copy and paste the code into every single level, every single scene. And it's like, oh. So Unity was a huge step up from that. I'm still happy with the time that I spent with Click Team Fusion growing up, but it definitely is not like really that suitable for larger scale projects. Because like when you work on something as big as Freedom Planet, for example, in Click Team Fusion, like there's a lot of stuff that you need to just like repeat that you don't need to do in other game engines. I've heard that that Fusion 3 is going to be a lot better in that regard, so I'm excited about that. Also, Dark Moon, thank you for Hydrate. And 10 pets and stretch care combo. So like yeah. Even from like Freedom Planet 2's workflow was a lot better, but there were still bottlenecks. And I definitely took that experience with me when I started working on Chrono Gear 6 months ago. And I honestly feel like our team for Chrono Gear has done in 6 months what normally would have taken me like twice that time in a previous project. Like we are going so fast, and like we have such an efficient workflow now based on like because I'm glad I went through that sort of learning experience in the past, because it really like helped me with this next project. And I'm sure with even with this project, I'll learn stuff that I can later apply to the next project that I work on. Oh, Dark Moon, hi. Oh right, you did the carrot combo. Whoa. I am a bat brain. All right, I'll do stretchy. Yeah, like, oh my goodness. Like I can't even believe, like, if you told me when I started Chrono Gear 6 months ago that it's something that we could possibly get done by the end of this year, I would not believe it. But it actually is a possibility, and that kind of like is crazy. And it helps a lot too, that I am also taking better care of myself. Like, you need to think of self-care in terms of like being like a mandatory task that you have to perform during a project. Like you can't just keep like going, because that will just keep you in a perpetual state of being worn out and creating like subpar content compared to what you're used to. That's something I also learned in Freedom Planet 2. I think one of the reasons that I was like falling behind so much is because I refused to take breaks. So like I was like pretty much like constantly working on the game when I was at home. But I was working at a slower pace than if I had like allowed myself to take like a proper break every now and then. I did go on trips every now and then, but usually it was to conventions to actually show the game off, so it didn't count as like a true break. Okay, can you read my nickname? Hi. Oh, hello. Megoskorostnaimasuripka? I did my best, but hello, welcome. Hope you're doing well. Yeah, can we call you Mego? Yeah, I agree, Blake. Don't go crazy with your budget at first. Just like embrace the value of making like a small, simple game that people can like breeze through in an afternoon. And they're like, it's fine to like dream big and go with like grandiose projects, but I really feel like making like a smaller game at first like helps helps not only with skill building early on, and also it helps with like making the project low risk, because you know it's one of your first projects, so you want it to be like as low risk as possible. So that's another reason to do a small project. Another one is that smaller games tend to be easier to get feedback with, because like, you know, like bringing in like players and testers, if they can just play through the game in an afternoon, then they'll be able to, like, it's more likely that they'll have time to play it, you know? Yeah, start small and give yourself a chance to grow. Yeah, going to convention just as a convention goer is stressful. You can't imagine having to go to run a booth. That's the funny thing is that I have never gone to a game convention as a guest. I've always gone as an exhibitor. So someday I want to go as a guest. I think it'd be really fun, and to give me an opportunity to actually meet some team members again and some friendos. And we can hang out and like see like the local sites and like try the local cuisine. One of my favorite things about going to those conventions was like just like trying out the local food. Oh, so good. Go as a guest? Yeah, that'd be so cool.
Is the amount of art assets we had to manage for this game compared to Sonic Mania. There's just so many more assets to keep track of, and it's a classic thing where there's this meme where artists name everything New Document 1 or New Document 10.
Yeah.
If you don't have a bookkeeping system in place for what your rig is called, how you name all your textures, and how you name sound effects and everything, there's just so much stuff that it's easy for people to lose track. So we figured a lot of that stuff out on this game, and on future games we'll be able to leverage that, which will be great.
Exactly.
8. Working on Freedom Planet 2. That was actually before Sonic Mania. That game was a real labour of love for Sabrina and the team. I was on very early on because Sabrina came to me and initially was interested in getting Freedom Planet on consoles. Thankfully there was an easier way of doing it than having to reprogram that game. And so instead she was basically like, can you help me set up the gameplay from Freedom Planet 1 in Unity for the sequel? And the graphics are going to be slightly larger, the sizes were different. At that time, Unity didn't have a lot of systems in place for 2D momentum. And then once it was at a point where you could play as Lilac with her core moveset from the original game, I can't remember if any of the other characters were in when I worked on it, but I just got it to the point where I was like, cool, we can see the game working in Unity. And from
Yeah, exactly. So he worked on it up until like we only focused on Lilac. Like once he passed it off to our team, we were the ones that ended up making the other characters. But yeah, I specifically commissioned Whitehead to like translate like as closely as possible Freedom Planet 1's physics, and by extension the physics of the Sonic World engine almost. But it was kind of its own thing at this point. To translate that into a Unity engine. And I specifically also wanted support for screen zooming, so that way we could zoom the screen out when the player picks up enough speed. I also wanted support for delta time, specifically so that when the game slowed down during certain situations, the frame rate would remain consistent. We did slow down in Freedom Planet 1, but it was choppy. So like we basically just like halved the frame rate whenever like a boss was defeated. It gave the impact that we were looking for. So like I think it still works in that context, but like definitely for Freedom Planet 2, we wanted more freedom with the way that we could like do slowdown effects. So I did specifically request that the engine like utilize delta time. And that also opened the door for support for like different frame rates, like different monitor frame rates. So that was a good decision to like stick with that. But yeah, like we just we just wanted like the base physics and just Lilac, and then like the rest of my team would take care of everything. Was the screen zooming inspired from Samurai Showdown to add that dramatic flair? I've never heard of Samurai Showdown, so no. For the sequel, we wanted to put the freedom back in Freedom Planet. Oh, yeah.
From there, I think I moved on to Mania soon after that, and then I was just sort of keeping an eye on that in the background. It was really satisfying to see that come out, because I heard the initial outlay of the story and what was going to happen in the game, but I didn't see any of the content until it came out years later. And so it was just a real cool surprise, and then almost surreal at the end, where it's like, oh yeah, I worked on that.
Yeah, let's go. Ah, I'm so happy. I'm so happy that like Christian Whitehead still like fondly remembers that experience, and I do as well, because I do as well. It was just like such a joy to be able to intersect with somebody who was like just like so passionate about like, you know, like game design in general, and who really like had like the technical know-how to really like help us get the project off the ground. So I am very grateful to Christian Whitehead for that. I think without his help, Freedom Planet 2 would have taken like a lot longer to get off the ground. So it's just like it was such an honor, and it was definitely worth it. I'm very glad that like he responded to my like initial like request when I approached him about the subject. But yeah, and I think I actually like I talked to him like a handful of times like throughout the 7 years that Freedom Planet 2 was in progress. Just to kind of like point out, hey, check out what we've been doing. I think it wasn't actually like contacting him directly. I think they were in the form of Twitter posts. Like I had been posting like footage on Twitter and everything, and then like Whitehead would kind of like see it and be like, like very grateful to have worked on this. Yeah, like I think I remember like he quote tweeted us a few times to just like mention that he had like done some work on it, because like his work on the base engine is something that I have not been shy about advertising whenever possible. So like whenever anyone like asks about the specifics, I tell them specifically that he was there for like the first couple months to work on the base engine, and then he passed it along to us. And I distinctly remember that like he was quite like very pleasantly surprised at the direction that we took the game in after he handed off the engine to us. Like I remember him being impressed by like the cutscene engine that we were working on, and by like the additional characters and like mechanics that we had like stacked on top of the base engine like since those early days. Oh my goodness. Yeah, thank you, Christian. Thank you for mentioning us, and oh my goodness, congratulations on Penny's Big Breakaway. I had so much fun with it that I pretty much just like blew through the entire game in a single sitting on stream. But like I can tell that Penny's Big Breakaway had a lot of heart put into it, and I cannot wait to see what Evening Star does in the future. So thank you again, Christian.
9. The future of momentum-based games. I've definitely seen how there was the indie scene before Mania and then the indie scene after. The thing that's really interesting for me is seeing how multiple genres are being blended together, like with Pizza Tower, where on the one hand there's the Wario influence, but then there's also the Sonic influence, and how moving those together creates something that's a different thing.
Yeah. I've heard comparisons with Penny's Big Breakaway to almost kind of like a 3D Pizza Tower almost, in the way that they kind of encourage like stringing combos together. I do feel like Penny's Big Breakaway is like less generous than Pizza Tower in terms of like combo strings. Like you land on the ground in Penny without like going into like a combo move, and your combo is over immediately. Whereas in Pizza Tower, it operates on a timer that decreases pretty rapidly, but it makes it easier to kind of like have a little bit of downtime between actions. So yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, 8-person. That's a good point. Two games that Christian Whitehead worked on are coming to consoles in the span of 3 months from each other. Yeah. Glad you didn't miss this part of the stream. Oh, I'm glad you're here. Yes, Pizza Tower mentioned. I had a lot of fun with Pizza Tower. I'd love to like try and go through that again to get like 100%, because I only did like I like my main concern was just being the game. Like, but apparently there's a lot of like stuff you can unlock. And I like the noise DLC would also be like a good incentive to run through it again, I think. You know, there are only 4 original zones in Sonic Mania? Okay. I think that's accurate. Okay, let's see. There's Studiopolis, there is Mirage Saloon, there is Press Garden, and there is Titanic Monarch. Is that all of them? You just got Pizza Tower the other day? You haven't started it yet, though, because of Rebirth and Dawn of War? Is that what that initial stands for? Oh, okay. Dead or I'm not sure what that stands for. Yeah, that's all for. Nice.
Even with Freedom Planet as well, that has a lot of action influences from titles like Mega Man Zero.
Yeah.
There's a bit of a combat focus in that game, and the bosses are way more aggressive than what you could do in Sonic because of the evolution in the mechanics in that game. I think, for me,
Yeah, exactly.
despite knowing the mechanics of Sonic so well, I didn't want to make a game that was close to Sonic, because having worked on it, there's just such a passionate love for the characters themselves that if you don't have the characters, it's hard to make people care about the game.
Yeah, that too. Like, that is a reason why I suggest that people who like make games that have like heavy influences from other games, I do recommend like working with what you know, like with what you're passionate about. So I do highly encourage game developers to kind of like play other games and use them as a reference point. But don't put all your eggs in one basket. Don't base your game on a single like franchise. Mix multiple things together, and that is such a cool way to kind of like come up with like a unique feel for your game. So like in the case of Freedom Planet, like Sonic, of course, it wears its Sonic influence on its sleeve, very heavily Sonic inspired. But just like what Christian Whitehead mentioned just now, it has a lot more focus on combat, like sort of like a Mega Man game, and like your movement speed, like your agility at low speeds is so much tighter than in a Sonic game, and that's what makes the combat work, and that's what makes it possible to have like more grandiose bosses than you would find in a Sonic game. So like I've said that we have the Sonic influence, we have the Mega Man influence, we have the Gunstar Heroes influence, and we have influence from like a bunch of other games too, in very minor ways. Just melt a bunch of stuff together and see what sticks. See what that specific combination of games, trying to ask yourself like how that specific combination of gameplay elements could like mesh together in a way that is fun and interesting. And something that I have also mentioned on my dev streams in the past is that if you fuse different genres together, make sure that the different genres that are represented in your game, make sure they're constantly like intersecting with each other. Like a lot of people tend to forget that most like what we think of as platform games these days, it's usually a fusion between two different genres, action and platforming. So a good an action platform game that feels very good to play is one that like uses the combat mechanics, like the action mechanics for platforming, and has the platforming mechanics like translate into like the action parts and vice versa. So like the easiest way that you can do that is if your character has combat abilities, like in Freedom Planet, for example, make them serve a secondary function of movement. So like, like Super Smash Bros, like every character has an up B. Most up B moves in Smash like attack your opponent, but they also act as a recovery tool that allow you to kind of like ascend upwards. That sort of thing. So like if you have like a dash attack, for example, like that could be used to maybe like to like cross gaps or something. So like you can kind of see like an example of why separating them doesn't work with Mila's grounded melee attack in Freedom Planet 2. I rarely ever see people use it because it has no movement utility. Like when Mila's standing still and you press the attack button, she just like does punches and kicks and that's it. It has no platforming function. It only serves it's only a combat function. And I also remember playing a game at Sage. I forget the name of it. But it kind of had that problem where it was trying to be a beat 'em up and like a high speed Sonic platform game, but those two aspects were completely separated. Like you had like the fast Sonic sections, and then it would just kind of like abruptly like transition into like beat 'em up sections, and like there was no reason to use any of your punches and kicks in the Sonic sections because they did not like affect your movement in any way. And conversely, there was no reason to use your dashes or boosts or any other like of your high speed moves in the beat 'em up sections because those did not cause damage to enemies. Right, Viridilia, I think that was the name of it. But like, I'm very happy to hear that the developer kind of like took my feedback to heart, and I can't wait to see like what they do with like the next version of the game in terms of kind of like better like blending those elements together. So yeah, like when you make a game that is more than one genre, make sure that the genres are intersecting, and I think that is like a very satisfying gameplay loop.
If they're like, oh, I wish Sonic was here, why isn't he here?
Oh yeah, that too. What Christian was saying, like that's another reason that you want to fuse different games together into like your gameplay. Like don't have a single like source of inspiration, because people are just gonna wish that they were playing as like the original the character from the series that you're referencing. So if you make like a game that is based only on Sonic the Hedgehog, but of course, like you swap Sonic out with your own original characters, people might play it and then they'll be like, I wish I was playing as Sonic right now. Whereas if you take the time to really like fuse genres, fuse different games together, different sources of inspiration, and then design your characters based around that fusion, people are gonna like fall in love with your characters, and it's gonna feel right, just like it did with Penny's Big Breakaway. Like, I can't imagine playing this game as any other character besides Penny, because she fits so well with the concept. Like, the entire concept of the game is built around her moveset. That was kind of your problem with Frontiers, where the high-speed action and the action combat didn't mesh well together. You know, now that you mention it, I kind of have that concern too. I haven't played the game yet because I still have to catch up on the Sonic chronology. But it does feel like it kind of like shifts abruptly between like boost style Sonic gameplay and like more of like a Devil May Cry-esque like combat system. I was worried about that. So it's kind of a shame that like Sonic's combat moves don't serve any function in like the speedy sections. You have a good feeling so far, Blake, with your characters, and they've had a positive reception in terms of design? Well, I'm glad to hear that. Yeah, like Pizza Tower, another really good example. Like Pizza Tower, just like Christian just said in the video, it fuses elements of Wario Land, but it also like has like a bit of Sonic influence as well. And because of that, like Peppino just feels like he fits in. If they had only gone for basing it like solely on Wario Land, people would be like, oh, I wish I could play as Wario. But that's not the case. People love Peppino because he like because of the way that the gameplay fuses those two elements together. He feels like right at home there. And people associate him with the specific way that Pizza Tower fuses those elements. So like, oh my gosh, it's so good. I love when like people fall in love with indie game characters in that regard. Spark 2 and 3 also kind of fall into the same pitfalls. I have noticed that, especially with Spark 2, like one of the points of contention was that like the speed and the combat don't mix well. I heard that was improved in Spark 3, but still is kind of there, kind of. Yeah, Peppino does have his own kind of charisma too. That helps a lot. He has so much personality that like you feel it would be a shame if he were swapped out with Wario almost. Yeah, Anton Blast is another game that is kind of it's really interesting because both Anton Blast and Pizza Tower have Wario Land as their main sources of inspiration. But I think Anton Blast goes less in the Sonic route. It goes in more of a traditional 2D platformer route. Oh, Crash Team Racing elements? Oh, now that you mentioned it, I can see that. Yeah. So that's why, despite both of those indie games like having heavy Wario Land inspiration, they're both like beloved for very different reasons. And the two characters are often drawn together in fan art, I've noticed.
Most rebelling. Anything that felt too Sonic-like, we were like, okay, we can't do that. We could have done it, and it would have been good, but we have to challenge ourselves not to do that, not to lean on that crutch. I think the challenge is, how can you take the core idea of momentum, but then use it with totally different constraints and goals for the actual stages that you play through?
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of different ways you can approach a platforming game. 10. Christian Whitehead, the Rockstar. In terms of live instruments, I play drums. I can do a bit of keyboards as well. Initially, when I was really young, I learned to play a piano. That I kind of stopped. My dad's a guitarist, and I tried to learn guitar, but then I found drums were my instrument that really resonated with me.
Nice. Like, I I really like genuinely like wish that like more people would have the opportunity to like play a music instrument growing up. I almost feel like it activates a certain part of your brain that is like different from like any other sort of medium. So it kind of like it can lead to like some radically new ideas if you practice it enough. I didn't really practice musical instruments growing up. But at some point I did get like a MIDI program on my computer, and I was able to like type notes and like play melodies and stuff. And that's how I kind of got into like composing game music. And I'm very glad I went through that experience, because like it's just like a nice change of pace to just like work on songs in my spare time for like a little bit. Like even though I feel like I don't usually produce something like on my own that like stands on its own, I do my best and I have fun with it, and I think that's what matters. Like in my streams, for example, my starting soon screen has an original piece of music that I made all by myself. And yeah, I mean, I could have commissioned somebody to make something that is like better, but you know, it's me. I'm proud of it. And I kind of feel that way, like even more so with Chrono Gear than with Freedom Planet 2. Like in the Freedom Planet series, I made all of my songs with the expectation that they would be remixed by somebody else on the music team. Most often Wooful, of course. But in Chrono Gear, like, especially in the early stages of the project, when I still was like working on it by myself, I really pushed myself to kind of like give it that polish that I usually reserve for other team members. And there are songs in the game that I worked on entirely by myself, and it probably will stay that way, and that makes me happy. There's a lot of cool variety that way too in the game, with like different musicians working on different things. I think at some point we'll just do like a final pass and have somebody do like mixing and mastering, so that everything feels like a little bit more consistent. Better? No, it is so good, Spacey. Oh, thank you, Alex. I mean, like objectively, there are ways you can improve it, but like, you know, it's me. And I think like in the context of having like this space for myself and like being able to stream as my battle self, like I can't really imagine like my background music, like especially for my starting soon screen, being composed by anyone other than me. It just fits too well. You cook so good. Thank you, Udshrive. Yeah, I try when I can. Oh my goodness. I just feel a lot more confident as a composer these days than I used to during the Freedom Planet era. And like, yeah, it's just because like I'm not trying to do what other musicians do. I just like try to stick with my own style, because like at this point in my life, I know what I'm good at. I know what specific like chord progressions resonate with me the most, and like I lean into that, and it feels nice. Oh, thanks everybody. Thank you.
T-Lopes and I go way back, and we're really good mates.
T-Lopes.
The work he's done on Penny's soundtrack is phenomenal. And also Sean Viallo, who's our new composer pick on this project. But I also basically
Let's go.
The songs on the soundtrack.
New composer.
T is obviously a man who's always in demand. There were a few moments in the project where we needed to get moving on a track and he was busy on something else. And so I'm like, here's some ideas that I whipped up for some of the stages. And then he took those demo tracks and then turned them into some really sweet songs.
That reminds me of the synergy that Woofle and I had during both Freedom Planet games. Like I would just like demo like a track, like focusing mainly on the melody, and then I'd pass it along to her, and then she would make something absolutely spectacular. And I do the same thing with our current project too. I will like prototype tracks and like pass them along to our music team and say like, hey, who wants to put their own spin on this idea? And it's like, yeah. Oh, you like It Is Foretold? I really like that too. I'm proud of that song as well. Especially because like that's kind of an interesting case, because for that song, I had composed it when I was like much younger, but like I kind of like took the song, like the original MIDI, and I put it into my DAW that I'm using now, which is Mixcraft 9, and I just like gave it that like modern spit and shine.
10 years and tell your younger self something to better your game development skills, what would it be? There were a lot of silly programming things that I could have progressed a lot faster if I'd known. With my early fan game work, I didn't know anything about virtual functions and a lot of more advanced programming topics. If I had the ability now, I'd be like, here's the cheat sheet of all the things you need to know, and it will boost you, get you 5 years ahead of where you are now as a programmer. And then you'll be able to finish your fan game in twice the speed that you could have done it. That's the one sad thing about the fan game story, is that as soon as I moved on to official Sonic stuff, the fan game, Retro Sonic, it meant we could never finish that game. It would have been cool to finish that fan game before I moved on to professional stuff. That's probably how I'd tell my younger self to cheat. Having the toolset that I had to make Mania back when I was a teenager, that would have been awesome. But at the same time, I suppose you have to earn those things to really understand them properly.
Yeah.
12. What is the moral of the Christian Whitehead story? David Bowie, in one of his interviews, he said, "Never play to the gallery. Always go a little further into the water than you feel you're capable of being in. Go a little bit out of your depth, and when you don't feel that your feet are quite touching the bottom, you're just about in the right place to do something exciting."
That's such a good quote. I haven't heard that before, but that is something that I'm feeling right now with Chrono Gear. Like, just like the overall workflow, like it still is in kind of the genre that I'm comfortable with, but like there's a bunch of things in it that are like just outside of my comfort zone. Like as aesthetically, I suppose like an example of that would be the fact that the characters are human, whereas I'm used to working with animal characters in the past. Also with the fact that like a lot of like the level design in certain missions is more evocative of like a mini Metroidvania almost. And also the fact that it's a more traditional platform game that doesn't lean on momentum physics as much, or at all really. And also the fact that a lot of the soundtrack is based on like official like Hololive music. And just the fact in general that we're like making like a fan game, which is something that I have never really done before with this level of experience. But yeah, that is a really good quote. I feel that.
You do have to put yourself in slightly uncomfortable situations. It would be very tempting to just stay comfortable, just continue doing the same thing every time. But I think people would get bored of that. And I realize that at the same time as an artist, not everything is going to hit in the same way. And especially the more out on a limb you get, some people may not like that. But I think at the same time, being able to look back on your body of work and being like, oh man, I tried so many different things. I'm in awe of how many times Bowie as an artist transformed himself and his aesthetic, his style, his musical direction and sensibilities. I'm not saying I'm David Bowie in any way, but just having that aspiration really intrigues me.
Aww. Yeah, oh my goodness. That was such a cool interview. And like, again, I'm very grateful that my paths crossed with Christian Whitehead for just that brief moment. That's the thing about life, isn't it? Like sometimes like we cross paths with people for just a little while, but it's something that we remember for the rest of our lives. And like even when you split paths with someone and you kind of like go on a different path in life, like you still kind of look back on that moment, and then you can see it makes you appreciate where they are now, and it makes you feel more proud of them and yourself. Oh, Ed Trash says, I know we mentioned how some people are not keen on Penny's art style, but like honestly, kudos to the devs for having such a strong, confident aesthetic. Yeah, I agree. Like, imagine if they tried to lean into like a more traditional like GameCube-esque aesthetic. You know, like Sonic Heroes or like Billy Hatcher and the Giant Egg, that sort of aesthetic. It would look good. They could pull it off, but like it wouldn't like stick out as much as the current art style does. The current art style is like something that I've never really seen pulled off in a game like this before. Yeah, this was a really cool interview. Very sincere thoughts and like great advice. Yeah, plus like Sonic Retro, that canceled fan game, it did turn out to be like you said, a person. It turned out to be like a big source of inspiration for like the next generation of indie developers. Yeah, I like it. All right, so I'm going to take a short break for a few minutes. I'm going to freshen up and everything, and then I'll be back and we'll continue our Hat in Time playthrough. So thank you all so much for watching this with me, and I'll see you soon. Bye. Spacey Bottotelli will return after the break.